So how does a tiny, kind of obscure, breakaway Jewish movement end up in this epic fight to the death with the Roman Empire? You know, the most powerful force on the planet. We're going to get right into it. This is the story of the very first Roman persecutions, and it's a wild tale of, well, misunderstanding, some serious political games, and just brutal violence that really set the stage for the next couple hundred years of conflict. Okay, so to really get this, we have to try and see it from the Roman point of view. And this quote from the historian Tacitus, man, it tells you everything you need to know. He doesn't call it a religion. No, he calls it an evil superstition. Just think about that for a second. Right from the get-go, there is zero respect. It's all suspicion for this group, whose founder was executed by the state as a criminal. So this wasn't some high-minded theological debate for them. For Rome, it was just pure contempt.
But here's the thing that's so fascinating. In the very beginning, this story has almost nothing to do with Rome versus Christianity. Not at all. It was a family feud. A civil war, really, happening completely inside the very diverse world of first-century Judaism. And this is the absolute key. You've got to get this part. The first followers of Jesus, they weren't trying to start some new religion. Nope, they were devout Jews. They just believed that the single most important thing in all of their history had just happened. So their message wasn't, hey, let's abandon Judaism. It was more like, hey, Judaism is fulfilled. This is it. In their own minds, they were the ultimate insiders.
So yeah, this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? The core conflict. On one side, you've got this new movement saying, we are it. We're the fulfillment of the promise. But to a lot of other Jews, they looked like a seriously dangerous heretical sect. And you have to understand, the fear was real. The worry was that this new group would tick off God and, even worse, bring down the wrath of the Romans on top of everybody. This was basically a battle for the soul of their faith.
So, what did the Romans think about all this drama? Well, for a surprisingly long time, they didn't really think about it at all. They barely even noticed. I mean, from their big imperial perch, this was just another little internal squabble among a group of people they already saw as kind of argumentative. As long as the taxes were getting paid and nobody was starting a full-blown riot, Rome was perfectly happy to just let them sort it out.
In this quote, it just captures that official Roman policy perfectly. It's total indifference. When the Apostle Paul gets dragged in front of this Roman official, Gallio, he basically just throws the whole case out of court. He's like, look, this is just some petty argument over words and names and your own law. You can almost hear him sighing. In other words, he's saying, this is not a Roman problem. You guys deal with it.
Yeah, but that hands-off approach, it wasn't going to last. A bunch of things were about to happen that would force Rome to take a much closer look. And when they did, they started to realize, wait a minute, this isn't just another Jewish sect. This is something new, something different, and in their eyes, something a whole lot more dangerous.
Okay, so you can see this gradual but really critical shift right here on the timeline. Let's walk through it. Around 51 CE, the Emperor Claudius kicks all the Jews out of Rome because of riots over someone named Christus, who is almost certainly Christ. But look who he expels, the Jews. He still sees this as an internal Jewish problem. Then, as we get into the early 60s, more and more non-Jews, Gentiles, start joining the movement. And suddenly, from the outside, it doesn't look so exclusively Jewish anymore. The lines are getting blurry. And then, boom, 64 CE, the Great Fire of Rome. That's the breaking point. After that, Christians are seen as their own separate, distinct, and very vulnerable group.
And becoming their own distinct group? Well, that had absolutely devastating legal consequences. So you have to remember, Judaism was an ancient, respected religion in the empire. It had a special legal status. Jews didn't have to worship the Roman gods. So as long as Christians were seen as just a type of Judaism, they were covered by that legal umbrella. But the second Rome started to see them as a separate, new religion, poof, that protection just vanished. Overnight. And now they were completely exposed.
And this is what leads us right to the first big, organized, state-sponsored persecution. And it wasn't started because of some deep theological debate. No, it was born from a political nightmare and one emperor's desperate need for a scapegoat. We're talking about the Great Fire of Rome. I mean, just try to imagine this. For 6 straight days and nights, a massive firestorm just tears through Rome. 10 of the city's 14 districts are basically burned to the ground. The people are homeless, they're devastated, and they are absolutely furious. They want someone to blame. And a really dangerous rumor starts to spread that the Emperor Nero started the fire himself. So Nero is in huge trouble. He needs a target, and he needs one fast. And according to our old friend Tacitus, he picks the Christians. So why them? Well, because they were already completely misunderstood. People thought they were weird. Tacitus says they were hated for their abominations, which sounds awful, but it was based on these wild rumors of cannibalism and incest, which were just a total misunderstanding of their rituals, like communion. They were a small, secretive group that pretty much kept to themselves. They were the perfect scapegoats.
And the punishment, it wasn't just a quick execution. Oh no, it was a sadistic public spectacle. It was horrific. Tacitus describes these scenes of just unimaginable cruelty. Christians being used as human torches to light up Nero's garden parties. People being crucified, others being torn apart by dogs. The goal here wasn't just to kill them, it was to turn their deaths into a kind of grotesque entertainment for the angry crowds. Okay, so a couple of important points to add here. First, this horrible persecution was probably just limited to the city of Rome. It wasn't empire-wide. And second, the official charge, which is really interesting, wasn't even arson. It was this bizarre accusation, hatred of humankind. What does that even mean? Well, because Christians didn't go to the pagan festivals or take part in the big public rituals, they just seemed antisocial, like they hated the Roman way of life. And this, by the way, is the time when tradition says both Peter and Paul were killed.
So after Nero, things actually quieted down for a while. But the next big wave of persecution, this time under the Emperor Domitian, it showed that the conflict was changing. It was evolving. It wasn't just about finding a scapegoat for a fire anymore. Now, it was about a fundamental clash, a total incompatibility between Christian belief and the Roman state religion.
And the main charge was atheism. Now, when we hear that word, we think of not believing in any god. But for the Romans, atheism meant you didn't believe in their gods. So, refusing to offer just a tiny pinch of incense to a statue of the emperor or to the traditional Roman gods, that wasn't just a private religious choice. That was seen as an act of treason. It was a rejection of the entire Roman social and political system. And for Christians, who only worshipped one invisible God, well, there was just no way they could get out of that charge.
So this emperor, Domitian, he was a real traditionalist. He was obsessed with bringing back old Roman customs. So he launches this big crackdown on what he called Jewish practices, because he thought they were eroding the Roman identity. But here's the thing, most Romans still couldn't really tell the difference between Jews and Christians. So when he cast this wide net, he ended up catching both groups. And man, you can see the psychological impact of all this right here. It's a total night and day difference. Just a few decades earlier, you have the Apostle Paul telling Christians, in Rome no less, to obey the government, that it's ordained by God. But now you have the book of Revelation, written during Domitian's reign of terror, and the author paints a very different picture. Rome isn't a civic authority to be respected. No, Rome is the great harlot, a demonic, bloodthirsty enemy of God. The shift in attitude is just staggering. So these first two big persecutions, the ones under Nero and Domitian, they were absolutely foundational. They might have been sporadic, not constant, but they drew the battle lines. They permanently stamped the relationship between this new faith and the Roman Empire as one of conflict. The die was cast. There was no going back. From this point on, just being a Christian was officially a potential capital crime. The state had shown it was willing to use unbelievable violence. And in return, a lot of Christians now looked at the empire and didn't see a protector. They saw a monster, a demonic enemy. And that dynamic, that hostile, antagonistic relationship, would define the next 200 years.
You know, this whole story kind of leaves us with this big, timeless question, doesn't it? From the inside, the Christians saw themselves as the light, as the truth. But from the outside, Rome saw them as a dangerous threat to their entire way of life. So it really makes you wonder, when a new movement comes along and challenges the old ways, who gets to decide if it's progress or if it's a threat? And what happens? What are the consequences when they get it wrong?